In a second.
Now moving on to Composite 13.
Here we go.
Brexit. Can I see all those in favour of Composite 13? Thank you. And all those against?
Big cheers for the votes against. Silence. What's she going to announce?
Sorry, I thought it was one way. Jenny said something else, so... It is lost? Yes, that was lost.
That was lost. So another victory for, that's a big blow for those who, the pro-Remainers. Another victory for Mr Corbyn. A lot of cheers, as you can hear there. You could hear a pin drop during that vote, couldn't you? The tension in the hall. Oh, is there a call for a card?
At 14, John, this is supporting the Corbyn motion, in effect, is it?
Yes, indeed. I think there's a call for a card vote. Let's wait and see what happens. Corbyn supporters cheering and singing his name. There was a call for a card vote. I'm not sure if the chair is allowing it.
Can we sit down? I know that's a difficult... Sorry? Okay. Just, can I just look? Whichever way I go with this, I'm going to be in trouble with some people. In my view, it was carried. It was in my view, it was carried. It's lost.
She said it was lost, I thought.
Sorry. Listen. I'm getting it that it was lost. Sorry.
Yes, she said it was lost a minute ago.
And whilst I accept we had a number of card votes yesterday, it was closer than what this was. It's very difficult. It isn't. We have nothing in our standing orders or constitution, which some organisations have, where if there's a number of people calling for it, we can do that. So it's the decision. The decision has to be, as I called it, that it was lost, and that's very difficult.
Well, it looks as though she's rejected calls for a card vote there.
Look,
some people in the hall obviously don't like it.
I understand the difficulties. We've had a really good debate. We've respected each other's points of view, and at the point where, you know, I can't. If it wasn't clear, I'd have asked for a card vote.
Conference, this is one of the most important decisions that the Labour Party will take this decade, and I think we deserve a card vote here. We have already heard from delegates. We've already heard from delegates that the unions actually are quite split on this. Unison are in favour of Composite 13. Unite were against. I think it's impossible to tell from the floor, given the number of card votes we had yesterday. We deserve a card vote here today. Democracy in action.
A real row going on here, as you can hear. A call for a card vote there. Let's see what the ruling is.
No. Let's... Delegates, no. Absolutely, please sit down. And to the last person, you can see my lanyard. I'm a member of Unison, a former president, and they will expect me to do what's right. And if it was carried, I would have said that, and it was lost, and they will accept that as well.
She seems to be sticking to her ruling that it was lost.
And that was lost.
Dramatic scenes here.
I mean, pretty extraordinary scenes, aren't they, for, you know, something that is so important for the party.
Well, that was a point that was being made by the person who demanded a card vote just then.
I want us to leave, and I want us to be right with each other, because the most important thing for any of us is a Labour government to deal with all the issues that we've talked about this week. So I'm now moving on to Composite 14. No, I'm not going back to that. We've had the discussion. I know you'll be upset. No, I'm moving on to Composite 14.
She's ruling out calls for a card vote. A lot of people in the hall don't like it.
Can I see all those in favour? No, I'm not going to be bullied and shouted at and all the rest of it. The decision's been made. Composite, no, I'm not taking a point of order on the same point. I moved on to Composite 14. Can I see all those in favour of Comp 14? Thank you. And all those against? OK, that is carried.
And that John, is a composite motion basically supporting Mr Corbyn.
Yes, but my word, there was a lot of controversy over that second vote, wasn't there, and calls for a card vote.
Can I,
but,
delegates,
can
I ask you to sit down, please?
A lot of cheering in the hall.
OK.
There'll be huge relief for Mr Corbyn.
The emergency motion. Human rights for the Uyghurs.
Yeah, so John, let's come back to you now. I mean, I think that's done, those three votes. Clearly a victory for Mr Corbyn. Some dispute over the manner of voting, so it shows the divisions within that party all too clearly. But how do you think the leadership will be feeling about that?
Relieved, I'm sure, because earlier today there were fears amongst Mr Corbyn's supporters that they might lose that second vote. Now, there will be, no doubt, throughout this evening and possibly tomorrow as well. We may not have heard the last of this. There may be more points of order raised, probably not today because they're about to finish, but tomorrow. Enormous relief. There was when Unison, and she heard Wendy Nichols there mention Unison. She used to be a former president of that union. Unison, big union, million-plus members, led by Dave Prentice, big Remain supporter. When we learned that they were swinging behind the pro-Remain motion, there were a lot of thoughts that perhaps Mr Corbyn would lose that vote. Clearly, a lot of delegates, some of the Momentum activists, many of them, will have supported that motion, but controversially the chair ruled that it was lost and she rejected calls for a card vote. I think the protests over that will probably run on long into the night, but as it is, the chair has ruled and Mr Corbyn has won all three votes. He will be mightily relieved.
All right, John, thanks very much indeed. Let's go straight back to Brighton now and talk about the victory for Jeremy Corbyn. His motion has effectively been passed at the conference. I'm joined by John McTernan, the former Director of Political Operations for Tony Blair, and Kathleen Clark, who's the mobilisation officer of the pro-EU group Our Future, Our Choice, and as a member of the Momentum campaign group. Welcome both. John McTernan, first of all. So Jeremy Corbyn sealing a victory here. Is it a coherent position, do you think, now for Labour?
I think it's utterly incoherent, and you could see the scale of the bullying going on. The chair saw one composite pass, then she was instructed by the General Secretary to say it had lost, and also instructed by the General Secretary to say there couldn't be a card vote, which is what you always have in a tight vote situation. This has left nothing resolved except that we have a catastrophic party management. There's a very bullying atmosphere, and the party, which wants to be a Remain party, is being denied that really for one person, Jeremy Corbyn. That's really unfortunate.
Yeah, and Kathleen Clark, there we are, a chaotic situation, and we're nowhere nearer working out what the position is.
Well, we've just seen democracy in action. It's a little bit confusing. I don't fully understand all of it myself. But what I can tell you, and I'm delighted to be able to say, is that Labour is now a people's vote party, and we are campaigning for a people's vote. That's a message that I'm very much looking forward to taking on the doorsteps in a couple of weeks' time when we take on the Tories and beat Boris Johnson. Yeah,
isn't John McTernan, isn't the problem with the Remain position that it leaves out a lot of Labour Leave voters, 3 or 4 million maybe, who voted Leave and then voted for Labour? That's the problem. They would be angry, wouldn't they?
if Labour wants to win the next election, it's got to win far more votes than the ones it got in the last election. Therefore, it's got to reach into the Tory party, it's got to reach into the Liberal party, it's got to reach into the SNP, the Green and the Plaid vote. In this coming general election, Labour has to be clear about everything it wants to do, on tax, on spending, on social care, on housing, but most of all, above the one issue that's going to define the coming decades, and that is whether we're a Remain party or a Leave party. And at the moment, we're a sort of Remain and sort of Leave party, and that's ultimately because Jeremy Corbyn wants Britain to leave the European Union, but wants to blame the Tories for it. That's incoherent. The voters can see that. That's why the Lib Dems are poised to surge past the Labour Party and become the second party in British politics, which is a tragedy.
Yeah, and Kathleen Clark, 45 seconds. Sorry, it's 45 seconds. I mean, how do you sell this on the doorstep? We're sort of Remain, we're sort of Leave.
Well, we're a people's vote party, which means we want the people to have the final say. We're not going to tell everyone what we think, we're just going to let them decide. It's time for the people to step back and decide. I also don't think that the Lib Dems are going to become the second biggest party in British politics after this general election. That's just my opinion as a Labour activist. I'm very excited to go out on the doorstep, and I can't wait for the next general election.
All right, and just in a word from both of you, what does Jeremy Corbyn vote for, Leave or Remain? In a word, both of you.
He's a Remainer. He's been clear about that in 2016. He voted for Remain. It's obvious.
Okay.
He's a lifelong Leaver. He's never changed his view on anything major.
You can be a Eurosceptic and want to remain in the EU.
We've got to go. Thanks very much to you both. There we are.
Just go back to the stitch-up part, which obviously the Daily Telegraph, no fan of the Labour Party, would obviously go on this line. But the moment in the hall when you raised your hands if you were for the policy and you raised your hands if you were against, everyone who saw that suggested it was quite hard to work out which way it went. And the fact there was no card vote...
means counting the vote.
On a policy, on a conference which sells itself on being democratic, seems a strange decision in some respects.
Yeah, and it's worse than that. I mean, according to this Telegraph story, I didn't watch the actual vote happen, but apparently it was, the vote happened, whoever was watching the vote and counting the votes said, Jeremy Corbyn's motion hasn't passed, Labour's going to be the party of Remain going into the next general election. And then Jenny Formby had a little whisper and said, well, actually, no, Jeremy Corbyn's motion has passed after all. And it just looks unbelievably undemocratic. And then you've got, I mean, so many... There's a quote from a shadow cabinet member calling it a stitch-up in here. And you've just got so many high-profile Labour MPs coming out against the party leader, who wasn't popular to begin with.
We've just got that moment. So let's just have a look at that if we can. Oh, maybe not.
Sorry, I thought it was one way and Jenny said something else, so... It is lost. Yes, that was lost.
The visual metaphor of the entire Brexit process of the last 3 years. There it is.
Wow.
I mean, you can even make an argument that maybe the auditorium was 52-48. And they had to try and develop a will of the Labour people off the back of it. Look, I can kind of see, if you try and boil this down intellectually, which is a real risk in politics, it doesn't actually matter about the good sense of a policy. It matters about whether it connects, whether it can be sold. Politics isn't really about nuance, as we know to our endless cost. But you can kind of see how they've intellectually got there, which is we want to get the best possible deal. That's our job if we're in government. So there's a proper option of leaving that could be believed and that wouldn't be.
Yes, we've not had our chance to negotiate.
So we want that, and we also want to give the option of Remain, and then we're going to let people campaign for Remain because it's what they believe. So you can see how you get here.
And Labour politicians can actually campaign for what they want. So you don't get people to effectively lie about their beliefs while they're on the doorstep.
Yeah, but I think the perhaps more cynical way of looking at it is that Labour basically doesn't want to alienate, Corbyn doesn't want to alienate his Brexit voters, nor does he. Labour have had this problem ever since the referendum happened. They're trying to straddle the hardcore Brexit voters in the north, you know, hardcore old Labour voters, and the southern metropolitan Remainers. And there's no real way of doing that. So Labour's policy now is have chaos and confusion, keep everything murky, and then hope that the Tories get Brexit sorted one way or another, and then have an election which isn't about Brexit at all.